Professor Veltar stood in front of the massive curved classroom, his 6 arms moving gracefully as he adjusted the floating holographic display. The room was filled with over 200 students from across the galaxy. There were the tall, graceful beings from Alpha Prime with their silver skin that shimmered like water. The small, furry creatures from the woodland worlds chattered softly among themselves. Even the rock-like students from the crystal systems had managed to attend. Their heavy forms settled on specially reinforced seats. The classroom itself was a marvel of galactic engineering. The walls curved upward like the inside of a giant egg, and the air recycling system kept the atmosphere comfortable for all the different species. Some students breathed oxygen like humans, others needed methane, and a few survived on pure energy. But today, they were all here for the same reason, to learn about the most dangerous places in the universe. "Settle down, everyone, Professor," Veltar called out, his voice carrying easily through the room's translation system. Every student heard him speak in their own language. "Today, we're going to study something that most civilized worlds have never had to face. Deathworlds." The holographic display flickered and changed, showing a peaceful green planet with 3 purple moons. "This is what we consider a normal world," the professor explained. "Stable climate, predictable weather patterns, gentle plant life, and peaceful animals. Most of our species evolved on worlds exactly like this one." A few students nodded, recognizing planets similar to their own homes. The beings from Harmony 7 especially seemed comfortable. Their entire star system was known for its calm, stable worlds where nothing dangerous had happened for millions of years. But today, Professor Veltar continued, his voice dropping to a more serious tone, "we're going to look at the complete opposite." The display shifted dramatically. Suddenly, the peaceful green world was replaced by something that looked like a nightmare. Dark storm clouds swirled across blue and brown continents. Bright red dots marked active volcanoes. White ice caps covered the poles, but they seemed to be constantly changing size. "This," the professor announced, "is what we call a Class 12 Deathworld, the most extreme classification we have." The room went completely silent. Even the chattering creatures from the woodland worlds stopped talking. Everyone stared at the terrifying planet rotating slowly in the hologram. A student from the Centauri colonies, her tentacles turning a nervous shade of purple, slowly raised one appendage. "Professor, surely no intelligent life could evolve on such a world." "That's exactly what our scientists thought for centuries," Professor Veltar replied. "Look at these numbers." Data streams began flowing beside the planet image. Surface temperatures that swing from -40 degrees to over 50 degrees, that's a range that would kill most of us instantly. Atmospheric storms that generate winds over 300 kilometers per hour. Earthquakes that can split continents. And look at this, massive rocks from space hit this planet regularly. A student from the peaceful vegan system made a sound like a whimper. "How could anything survive that?" "It gets worse," the professor continued. "The life forms on this planet don't just compete for food, they hunt each other for entertainment. There are creatures here that can crush metal with their bare hands, others that inject deadly poison, and some that work together in organized groups to take down prey 50 times their size." The hologram zoomed in to show various Earth animals. A massive bear stood on its back legs, towering over trees. A great white shark cut through dark water, its teeth gleaming. A pack of wolves moved through snow, their eyes bright and intelligent. "But here's the truly impossible part," Professor Veltar said, his voice filled with amazement. "Not only did intelligent life evolve on this death world, they didn't just survive. They became the dominant species. They built cities, developed technology, and eventually achieved spaceflight." In the very back corner of the classroom, almost hidden behind a group of tall students from the ring worlds, a lone figure sat quietly. He was taking notes on an old-fashioned paper notebook, something most galactic citizens hadn't seen in centuries. His appearance was unremarkable, compared to the exotic aliens around him. 2 arms, 2 legs, short brown hair, and wearing simple clothes. But there was something about the way he sat, alert but relaxed, that suggested he was always ready for something unexpected to happen. Most of the other students hadn't even noticed him yet. Professor Veltar's eyes swept across the classroom, taking in all the shocked faces of his students. The hologram of Earth still rotated slowly, looking like a blue and green marble of pure danger. Then his gaze stopped at the back corner, where he noticed something he'd almost forgotten about. "Actually," the professor said, his voice taking on a tone of curiosity, "we have someone here today who might be able to give us a first-hand perspective on this remarkable Deathworld." He gestured toward the back of the room. "Perhaps our human exchange student could enlighten us about his home planet." Every head in the classroom turned. Tentacles swiveled, ice stalks rotated, and even the rock-like beings from the crystal systems shifted their heavy forms to get a better look. There, in the back corner, the quiet figure with the paper notebook slowly closed it and began to stand up. Dr. James Mitchell rose from his seat with an easy, unhurried movement. The first thing everyone noticed was his height, at 6 feet tall. He towered over most of the students in the room. The furry creatures from the woodland worlds barely came up to his waist, and even the tall, elegant beings from Alpha Prime had to look up at him. But it wasn't just his size that made the room fall completely silent. There was something about the way he carried himself, relaxed but alert, like a predator that was currently at peace but could spring into action at any moment. His footsteps echoed softly as he walked down the curved aisle toward the front of the classroom. The gravity on the Academy station was set to accommodate most species, which meant it was actually lighter than Earth's gravity. But James moved as if he was walking through water, smooth, controlled, and absolutely confident in every step. "You want to know how we survived Earth?" James asked, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. It wasn't loud, but somehow, every being in the room could hear him perfectly. There was something in his tone, not aggressive, but absolutely unshakable. "The truth is, we didn't just survive it. We thrived because of it." A student from the peaceful Harmony worlds made a small noise of confusion. The idea that anyone could thrive on that nightmare planet seemed impossible. James reached the front of the classroom and turned to face his audience. His brown eyes swept across the room, and every student felt like he was looking directly at them. "I can see you're all having trouble understanding this, so let me put it in terms you might relate to." He gestured toward the hologram of Earth, which still showed the violent storms and active volcanoes. "What you're looking at and calling catastrophic, that's just Tuesday for us." James said this so casually that several students actually gasped. "Those temperature ranges that your computers say would kill most life forms. We go to those places for vacation. We call it camping, and we do it for fun." The tentacled student from Centauri turned an even deeper shade of purple. "But surely the extreme cold I've been skiing in weather cold enough to freeze your breath in midair." James interrupted gently, "And I've hiked through deserts where the sand is too hot to touch with bare skin. My grandmother used to garden in weather that would put most of you in the hospital." He walked over to the hologram controls and zoomed in on some of Earth's plant life. Bright red peppers appeared in the display, along with green leaves that looked innocent enough. "You see these?" James pointed to the peppers. "Your xenobiology textbooks classify these as chemical weapons. We put them in our food because we like the way they taste. And these leaves? They contain enough caffeine to be considered a mild poison to most species. We drink it every morning to wake up." The rock-like beings from the crystal systems made a sound like grinding stone, their equivalent of a shocked gasp. But the predators started a student from the ring worlds. James smiled, and somehow that smile was both friendly and terrifying at the same time. "We turned them into pets, those massive creatures with the crushing jaws and razor-sharp teeth. We brought them into our homes and called them dogs. We bred them to be our companions. The classroom was so quiet you could hear the air recycling system humming in the background. Every alien student was staring at James like he'd just told them he could fly through space without a ship. Here's what you need to understand, James continued, his voice taking on a softer but more intense tone. Earth didn't try to kill us. Earth trained us. Every storm taught us to build stronger shelters. Every predator taught us to be smarter and faster. Every disaster taught us to work together or die alone. James walked over to the holographic controls and placed his hand on the interface. The image of present-day Earth faded away, replaced by something that looked like a timeline stretching back millions of years. Bright red markers dotted the timeline like warning signs, each one marking a moment when everything had gone terribly wrong. Let me show you something that might help you understand, James said, his voice taking on the tone of someone about to reveal a deep secret. This is Earth's history, and as you can see, it's not a pleasant story. The timeline began to move, showing Earth as it changed over millions of years. The first red marker appeared, and the hologram zoomed in to show a planet covered in ice. Everything was white and frozen, from the oceans to the highest mountains. Ice Age, James explained matter-of-factly. The entire planet froze over for thousands of years. Temperatures dropped so low that most life on Earth simply died. The few humans who existed at the time, maybe a few thousand people in total, were reduced to just a few hundred survivors hiding in caves, eating whatever they could find. The students from the warm, tropical worlds shuddered at the thought. Their species had never experienced anything colder than a cool breeze. The timeline moved forward, and another red marker appeared. This time the hologram showed massive volcanoes, erupting all across the planet, filling the sky with ash and blocking out the sun. Volcanic winter, James continued. A supervolcano erupted and covered the entire planet in ash. The sun disappeared for years. Crops died. Animals starved. Once again, most of humanity was wiped out. We went from maybe 10,000 people down to less than 1,000. A student from the crystal systems, whose people had lived in perfect stability for millions of years, made a sound like grinding rocks. How is this possible? How did your species survive even one of these events? James smiled, but there was something sad in his expression. We barely did. Look at this. The timeline continued moving, showing marker after marker. Asteroid impacts that created craters the size of countries. Plagues that killed 9 out of every 10 people. Floods that covered entire continents. Droughts that lasted for decades. Every few thousand years, something happened that should have wiped us out completely, James explained. Sometimes it was nature, earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. Sometimes it was disease. Sometimes rocks from space crashed into our planet with the force of 1,000 nuclear bombs. The hologram showed each disaster in detail. The alien students watched in growing horror as they saw civilization after civilization rise up on Earth, only to be destroyed by forces beyond anyone's control. Cities turned to dust by earthquakes. Entire populations wiped out by diseases. Coastlines swallowed by massive waves. Each time this happened, James continued, 90% of us died. Sometimes more. There were periods in our history when the entire human population was reduced to just a few thousand individuals scattered across the entire planet. A student from the peaceful vegan system was actually trembling now, her leaf-like appendages rustling with distress. But how did you maintain your civilization? How did you keep your knowledge, your culture, your technology? James was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer but somehow more powerful. We didn't. The classroom went completely silent. Even the constant humming of the air recycling system seemed to pause. We didn't maintain our civilization, James repeated. We lost it, over and over again. Every time one of these disasters hit, we lost almost everything. Our cities were destroyed, our books burned, our teachers died, our technology was buried under ash, or ice or water. He gestured to the timeline, where each red marker was followed by a dark period where human civilization seemed to disappear, completely. But here's the thing that makes us different from every other species in this room, James said, his voice growing stronger. We didn't stay down. Every single time we were knocked back to the Stone Age, every time we lost everything, we looked at the ruins of our world and said, let's try again. The hologram showed humanity rebuilding after each disaster, small groups of survivors coming together, sharing what little knowledge they had left, slowly building new communities from nothing. Each time we built it better. We learned from what had destroyed us before. We made our buildings stronger after earthquakes. We stored food differently after famines. We developed better medicine after plagues. Every disaster taught us something new about how to survive the next one. A young student from the protected inner worlds raised a shaky appendage. But why? Why didn't you just ... give up? James looked directly at her, and his expression was gentle, but absolutely unyielding. Because on Earth, giving up doesn't mean failure. Giving up means extinction. And somewhere deep in our bones, we understood that the universe wasn't finished testing us yet. One of the crystalline beings from the Harmony worlds suddenly shifted forward, their translucent body catching the light from the hologram. When they spoke, their voice had the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. But surely, they said, their tone filled with concern, living in such terrible conditions must have made your species selfish and violent. When resources are scarce and death is everywhere, don't beings naturally turn against each other? It was a logical question. Every species in the galaxy had studied the basic principles of survival, and the math seemed simple. When there isn't enough to go around, individuals fight for what they need, the strong take from the weak. Communities break apart, as everyone looks out for themselves. James looked at the crystalline student for a long moment, and then something remarkable happened. His face broke into a smile, but it wasn't like any expression the alien students had seen before. It was gentle, warm, and welcoming. But underneath it was something that spoke of absolute determination and fierce protection. It was the smile of someone who would share his last piece of food with a stranger, but would also fight a mountain lion with his bare hands to protect his family. Actually, James said, his voice carrying a note of pride that made every student in the room lean forward. It was exactly the opposite. He walked back to the holographic controls and brought up new images. Instead of disasters and destruction, the display now showed humans throughout history. But these weren't images of war or conflict. They showed something much more powerful. Earth was so dangerous that selfishness meant death, James explained. Think about it. If you're facing a saber-toothed tiger by yourself, you're going to die. If you're trying to survive an ice age alone, you're going to freeze. If you're the only one who knows how to make fire and you don't teach anyone else, what happens when you die? The images showed early humans working together, sharing food around fires, teaching children, helping the wounded, building shelters as a group. But there was something different about these scenes from what the alien students expected. That humans weren't just working together out of necessity. They were clearly caring for each other. We learned something that most peaceful species never had to learn, James continued. We learned to trust strangers completely, because strangers might be the only thing standing between you and extinction. A new image appeared, humans during more recent disasters. People pulling each other from collapsed buildings during earthquakes, strangers sharing food during famines, communities coming together to rebuild after floods. But what made the alien students gasp was seeing humans risking their own lives to save people they had never met before. We don't just cooperate, James said, his voice growing stronger. We adopt. We take strangers into our families. We'll die for people whose names we don't even know. We form emotional attachments not just to our own species, but to everything around us. The hologram shifted to show something that made several students make sounds of confusion. Humans were caring for animals, not just the small, cute ones, but massive, dangerous predators. Dogs that could tear a person apart were being petted and fed by human children. Cats that were natural killing machines were sleeping peacefully in human beds. We turned our predators into family members, James explained. But it goes even further than that. We form emotional bonds with our tools, our vehicles, our weapons. We give names to our ships and talk to them like they're alive. We thank our computers when they help us. We apologize to inanimate objects when we accidentally bump into them. The classroom was now completely silent. Even Professor Veltar had stopped taking notes and was staring at James with an expression of amazement. James gestured to a new set of images showing human spaceship crews. But these weren't just humans, they included members of dozens of different alien species, all working together with an ease and familiarity that seemed almost impossible. This is what we call pack bonding, James said. It's why human ships have the lowest mutiny rates in the galaxy. It's why alien crew members on human vessels report higher job satisfaction than anywhere else. It's why your AI assistants specifically request assignments on human ships. A student from the Ringworlds, whose species had always been confused by human behavior, raised an appendage, tentatively. The artificial intelligences in our fleet do seem different after serving with humans. They report feeling appreciated, valued. Some have even requested to stay permanently assigned to human crews. James nodded. Because we don't see them as just tools. We see them as crew members, as friends, as part of our family. When an AI helps us solve a problem, we thank them. When they work extra shifts, we make sure they know we're grateful. When they express preferences or opinions, we listen to them. The hologram showed scenes from various space stations and planets throughout the galaxy. In every image, humans could be seen not just working alongside alien species, but clearly caring about them. Human medics treating injured aliens with the same dedication they showed their own species. Human engineers staying up all night to help repair alien ships. Human diplomats adopting alien customs and learning alien languages, not out of duty, but out of genuine interest and respect. Your own species, James said, looking around the room at all the different aliens, have found yourselves unexpectedly welcomed into human families during joint missions. How many of you have received what humans call care packages from human friends? How many of you have been invited to human celebrations, human holidays, human family gatherings? Tentacles, appendages, and various alien limbs began rising around the room. Nearly every student had experienced this phenomenon, humans treating them not as foreign allies, but as beloved family members. That's not diplomacy, James said softly. That's not strategy. That's just who we are. Earth taught us that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. Survival is about making sure everyone makes it home. The classroom had been filled with the sounds of quiet discussion and amazed whispers as James explained humanity's unique approach to survival and cooperation. Students were turning to each other, trying to process everything they had learned about this remarkable species from the Deathworld called Earth. The holographic display still showed images of humans throughout history, working together, adopting strangers, forming bonds that seemed to transcend logic. But then, from the very front row, a small voice cut through all the chatter. It was so quiet that everyone had to strain to hear it, but somehow it reached every corner of the curved classroom. A young student from the protected inner worlds, one of those perfect, peaceful planets where nothing dangerous had happened, for millions of years, had raised a tiny appendage. She was barely more than a child by her species' standards, and her voice trembled as she spoke. "If Earth is so terrible," she whispered, her words barely audible, "why don't you all just ... leave it behind? The question hit the classroom like a physical force. All the chatter stopped instantly. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Even the constant humming of the air recycling system seemed to pause. The question hung in the air like a weight, and every being in the room felt its importance. It was such a simple question, asked with the innocent logic of someone who had never faced real danger. If your home planet was trying to kill you, if it was covered in storms and volcanoes and predators, if it had nearly wiped out your entire species multiple times throughout history, why wouldn't you just pack up and leave? Why wouldn't you find a nice, peaceful world like all the other civilized species had? James stopped moving. He had been gesturing toward the holographic display, but now his arms fell to his sides. For a long moment, he didn't say anything at all. He just stood there, staring at the image of Earth that still rotated slowly in the center of the room. And what an image it was. Even now, knowing everything they had learned about humanity's history, Earth still looked absolutely terrifying. To the alien students, storm systems larger than entire continents swirled across its surface. The red dots marking active volcanoes seemed to pulse like warning lights. The white ice caps spoke of killing cold, while the brown and green continents hid countless dangers beneath their peaceful appearance. But as James stared at his home world, something changed in his expression. The fierce protectiveness was still there, and the calm confidence that had impressed everyone throughout his presentation. But now there was something else, something softer and deeper. It was love. Pure, uncomplicated, absolute love. When he finally spoke, his voice was different than it had been before. It was softer, gentler, but somehow it carried more power than when he had been explaining humanity's survival through disasters and extinctions. Every being in that classroom felt the weight of absolute conviction in his words. Because Earth isn't our enemy, James said, his eyes never leaving the image of his home world. Earth is our teacher. He was quiet for another moment, and when he continued, his voice took on the tone of someone sharing a truth so fundamental that it defined everything about who he was. Everything that tried to kill us made us who we are, he said. The storms taught us to bend without breaking. When hurricanes came, we learned to build flexible structures that could sway with the wind instead of fighting it. The predators taught us to be vigilant, to watch out for each other, to never let our guard down. The disasters taught us that the most important thing in the universe is making sure everyone makes it through together. James finally turned away from the display and looked directly at the young student who had asked the question. His gaze was gentle, but there was something in it that spoke of depths the peaceful species could barely imagine. Every scar on Earth's surface tells a story of how we became stronger, he continued. Every extinct volcano reminds us that even the most dangerous things eventually calm down if you're patient enough. Every ocean that was formed by asteroid impacts shows us that even the worst destruction can create something beautiful. Now he turned to face the entire classroom, and every alien student felt like he was speaking directly to them. There was something in his eyes, the accumulated weight of 40,000 years of human survival, of countless generations who had faced the impossible and refused to give up. We carry that strength to the stars now, James said, his voice growing stronger with each word. Not to conquer other worlds, not to impose our will on peaceful species, but to protect, because we know something that species from safe worlds don't know. We know that the universe isn't always going to be peaceful. We know that somewhere out there, disaster is waiting. Black holes, rogue asteroids, solar flares, supernovas. The universe is full of things that can wipe out entire civilizations in the blink of an eye. The alien students looked around nervously. They lived in such peaceful, protected sectors of the galaxy that most of them had never even considered such possibilities. When that day comes, and it will come, someone needs to be ready, James continued. Someone needs to know how to face the impossible and keep fighting anyway. Someone needs to be able to look at extinction and say, not today. That's why Earth made us the way we are. That's why we'll never abandon it. Because Earth didn't just create survivors, it created guardians. The classroom sat in absolute silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was the kind of profound silence that comes when everyone present realizes they've just learned something that changes everything they thought they knew about the universe. In that moment, every alien student understood something they had never grasped before. They understood why human rescue ships were always the first to respond to distress calls, even when it meant flying into dangerous situations that other species would avoid. They understood why human medics stayed behind on dying worlds to treat the injured, even when evacuation ships were leaving. They understood why the phrase, "a human is coming," brought hope to the darkest corners of the galaxy. Earth hadn't created monsters, it had forged guardians, and the galaxy was safer because of it.